Hej och välkommen till Penser Bank. Jag heter Marcus Almrud och är analytiker här på banken. Idag har jag med mig Patrik Cerwall som är Head of Strategic Marketing Insights på Ericsson. Varmt välkommen Patrik och tack för att du ville komma hit och prata med oss.
Tack så mycket.
Så lämnar jag över ordet till dig och sen så återkommer jag med lite Q&A lite senare.
Tack så mycket. And I plan to do this presentation in English to make sure that everyone understands and gets what I'm saying. So I hope that is fine with you. I'm very happy to be here. Happy to be able to talk to you about 5G and where 5G is and where 5G is going and the status of it right now. So I'm heading up a team in Ericsson called Strategic Marketing Insight, and we're spending a lot of time of trying to understand the development in the market, and especially for 5G then, of course. So I will start a little bit from the beginning and talk about how 5G is something new, something different from what we have had before. It is really a transition into a new paradigm, a transition where we are seeing new type of services coming. If you think back on the different Gs we have had, 1G, 2G, 3G, most of these, or basically all of these, were for one single service. It was voice, it was text, SMS. When 4G came, that was the first time we started to see mobile broadband and Internet of Things being more relevant and becoming more broader. But then with 5G, we're expecting a number of different services to come, not just for consumers, but also for industries. So what is different, or where are we now with 5G? Here are some numbers just to paint the first picture of it. There's right now around 200 live 5G networks in the world. And this is spread on all markets, all regions of the world. And we have over 800 different 5G devices that is commercially available today. So, and that is one reason why 5G goes faster than what we've seen before. There's plenty of more handsets early on in the cycle. I will come back to that. We also talk about population coverage. That's basically how many people are in an area where they have coverage from a 5G signal. And when we do the calculation of trying to understand where people live, where the networks have been built, we're right now at the point where around 25% of the world population actually is covered by 5G signals. And given the fact that there is around 50% of the world population in cities, you can understand that many of the bigger cities are getting covered, not all, and there's still a lack of coverage in some regions. But overall, it goes very fast, and some markets faster than others. Right now, the average monthly mobile data traffic per subscriber in South Korea, just take one example there, is actually up to 26 gigabyte per month. That's a huge amount of gigabytes that they are using in that market. And South Korea is one of those markets where actually things are developing faster than in other places. And we'll come back a little bit to South Korea as well, and to exemplify some of these markets, what actually are happening there. And a lot of the network is carrying 5G traffic right now. On the bottom side here, I won't go into the detail, is basically the Ericsson numbers in terms of how Ericsson is positioned and where we are present, and the 5G networks we are supporting. But going back a little bit to 5G and what 5G actually is, it is about introducing a lot of new capabilities. On the surface, it may look like it's more of the same, more of the mobile broadband as we know it. And many of you might have already got a 5G phone, and you don't maybe experience a lot of difference from your 4G phone. But there is a couple of big changes that have happened. First of all, on the security side, it's much more protected from a standardization perspective. The 5G security has been a key thing to make sure that it's secure and can be trusted. It's more reliable, more predictable as well. And that's also where we are, the standard or the industry have worked hard to make 5G very workable also for the business side of things, in industries, in different critical communication situations where we really need 5G to perform and always be trusted. Another big thing, especially for operators in the world, is of course that the capacity that 5G brings also drives down the cost per gigabyte. So we expect with using 5G and the underlying 4G spectrum that's also available there, we can basically cut the cost per gigabyte produced over the mobile networks with quite a lot, going down to almost 10% what the cost had been if you were to do it without 5G. And then there is the scalability, the performance, and latency. Latency here is basically means that the response times, ping, if you were to test it from in your own laptop and see how fast it is. That has been worked on. We are trying to then get down to fiber-like latency numbers, which 5G will bring with all the capabilities it has. Scalability, making sure that it's a global standard, and also the performance, where you actually are able to increase performance both in downlink and uplink. That basically means both the signals coming down from the antenna to the device and the other way around. And the whole thing, of course, then allows a lot of new type of services to be built on. So we'll come back a little bit to what those services are. So another thing that is new with 5G, which has always been a big thing with every new generation of mobile networks, is availability of spectrum. And the spectrum is something that is decided upon in UN organization, which is called ITU, and they are deciding in special world radio conferences that happen every 4 years, how much spectrum goes to unlicensed, basically Wi-Fi, how much goes to the satellite, how much goes to other types of services, but also then how much goes to cellular traffic. And for 5G, this has already been decided to have a lot of spectrum available, both what we call the low band, mid band, and high band. Low band here is basically, if you think about GSM, the spectrum that is for GSM, and that the lower the frequency, the longer the reach of the signal is. So when you're around 900 or 700 megahertz on that spectrum band, you can reach far. It penetrates buildings, it goes into far away, and so on. You can actually have a lot of coverage, but you don't have so much spectrum available there. And number of bands, so basically the amount of spectrum per band, is also what decides on what speed and capacity you can actually get out of it. Mid-band, this is where 4G is today, and it's around 3.5 gigahertz, which have been separated or basically designed for 5G. And with that spectrum band, there is more spectrum available. It reaches almost as far as the low band, and can provide a lot of good capacity. And then we have the high band. High band is where you're up to 26 gigahertz. It's basically what we actually are referring to, the millimeter wave band. And there is a lot of spectrum available there, so you can have very, very high speed and capacity on that band, but you don't have the longer reach. This is probably quite useful in cities, in indoor situation, in campuses, in industries and factories, but also in stadiums and so on. And you can have a lot of people having very good 5G connectivity with this high band. So the amount of spectrum and the amount of frequency that you have decides a lot on how 5G actually produces. And if you put everything together, you can actually use all the bands at the same time on your device. And doing that, then you use a function called carrier aggregation. But we don't need to go into the details of that, but it basically means that doing all these things, you can have very, very high speed on 5G, which is not possible on 4G. So much more capacity on 5G, much more higher speed is possible then, the more spectrum you have. So going then to the opportunities that we look at, when it comes to the 5G, it's very much a connectivity-driven revenue that is we're seeing for, especially for the operators. If you look at the mobile operators of the world, they have, if you look at the left-hand side here, quite a lot of revenue already with their base connectivity, the mobile broadband, the systems that they have built out on 4G. But if you just continue with more of the same, due to price erosion, due to the fact that cost goes down over time, that will not be enough to actually increase revenue. But this is where we talk about the opportunities to actually increase revenue, also for operators, when driven by new type of connectivities. And this is where ideas like virtual reality, augmented reality, or new types of immersive solutions for consumers will come in. Then we have fixed wireless access, and that is basically using 5G as a way to replace or complement fiber at home. So basically fixed broadband at home, but using 5G instead. And then it's called fixed wireless access. On top of that, we have some revenue possibilities also for when it comes to digital services for operators. This is basically where they are able to innovate themselves on new applications that they develop themselves. But most of it will come from this innovative. Now I also only looked at the consumer side here. Then we have to realize that on top of this, there is a huge opportunity for operators also to go into the fixed to the business to business area, where we have all the different industry sectors like health sector or utilities or manufacturing, ports, mining. All of these different areas are possibilities for operators to also be part of, and that is driven very much by the digitalization of these industries. They want to be doing things better, more secure, more cost efficient, and their 5G has a big role to play. So if you look at the applications of 5G and what is here now and what is coming, this picture tries to highlight both the enterprise side and the consumer side, if you see here. On the bottom is where we are today, basically the enhanced mobile broadband, MBB. We have fixed wireless access, FWA, and then Internet of Things or wide area IoT, which is basically a bag tracker in your if you're tracking your bag, or you put some smart meter thing into and work on that, or logistics, connecting a truck or something like that. Mission critical. This is where we looking at replacing some of the blue light systems that are available today. But on top of this, there's a number of different things that can happen, both private networks, building separate licensed spectrum networks for certain enterprises. Could be ports, it could be a campus, it could be a factory. But on the right-hand side of this, we have mobile gaming as a new thing that we definitely think will happen. It's still available, but cloud gaming, where you basically are not downloading the game, but you're actually using it from a server somewhere, but basically streaming it to your mobile. And those type of solutions are coming, and we see a big potential of that. And on top of that, there is many more future innovations happening. It could be XR. XR stands here for anything reality, virtual reality, augmented reality, hybrid reality, and so on. It could be a mixed reality. So there's a number of different ideas here, and there will be a lot of innovation on this market for sure that drives all these things. But let me talk a little bit more on where we are when we look at the status today of 5G and the forecast that we have. This graph tried to highlight the mobile subscriptions by technology. The orange part here is 5G, and the green here is 4G, and then we have 3G and 2G. As you see, all technology is going to continue to exist. On top here, you see 5G going to be quite a lot. So we already now saw 660 million 5G subscriptions end of last year. We expect that to reach 4.4 billion by 2027. That means that basically half of all the mobile subscriptions in the world will be 5G in 6 years' time. So it's not a matter of whether 5G will happen or not. It's more a matter of how 5G will be used in all these markets. 4G will continue to be there, a very big part of the world. And the peak of 4G is basically happening now, I would say. But then there's a big migration then over to 5G. So is 5G faster than 4G when it comes to development? Yes, it is. If we compare the number of 5G subscriptions to 4G subscriptions with the same amount of years after deployment or after the first launch of it, you can see the different graphs here, where 5G is basically almost reaching the 1 billion subscription mark almost 2 years ahead of what 4G. And the big reason for this is that China is much more early on now with 5G. When it comes to 4G, they were 2-3 years later in developing or moving to 4G. Another big difference is all the availability of handsets. Just on smartphone handsets, there are more than 400 models launched in, and it stands for around 23% of global volumes right now, or end of last year, compared to only 9% for 4G at the corresponding. The availability of handsets is definitely a big reason for this, but also the fact that we have so many smartphone users. So the step going from a 4G handset, 4G smartphone to a 5G is a smaller step than it might have been back in the years when you went to 4G. That was the first time you got a smartphone at all. If we look at this and spread this out over regions, we have this graph. It might look a bit busy here, but I'm just going to go through it quite quickly, but still talking about it. The first bar of each region here is for 2021, and the second bar is 2027. And here you can see the transition from technology to in the different regions. You have sub-Saharan Africa to the left, which is still a very much a 3G, 2G market, going to becoming more and more 4G, but still going to be a lot of 2G and 3G in 2027. And then you have all the way to the right, the more mature markets, which are already now having quite a lot of 5G. Northeast Asia is basically ahead here. We have North America as well, quite far off, while by 2027 it's going to be North America and Western Europe, together with the Gulf countries and also Northeast Asia, that will have most amount of 5G subscriptions. So these are markets that already today are very much 4G, and they are then fast on 5G. But that doesn't mean that the other markets are necessarily far behind. If you take a market like India, 5G hasn't happened there yet, but we still believe that they're almost going to be 40% 5G by 2027. That's almost 400 million 5G subscriptions. So it's quite a big market. So it will happen in many markets. And looking at, when 5G comes, there's also a big increase in traffic. And traffic here is basically network data traffic, how much is used. And we have been following this from Ericsson the last years and basically looked at how much traffic is actually coming through the networks. And this bar basically talks about the total amount of traffic, monthly traffic on a quarter basis, and we count both the traffic going from the mobile and up to the system, to the antenna, but also the way back from the network down to the mobile. So both what we call uplink and downlink. Anyway, the graph here, you see a growing number of traffic points in globally, but the line here talks about the year-over-year growth. And it's been hovering around 60% year-over-year growth with some bumps, some things that have happened in the market, but the last couple of quarters here is going down. But this is actually quite expected that it goes down, because when you measure, of course, year-over-year, the starting points as time goes by will be higher. So we cannot really sustain a 50-60% growth forever. So somewhere it has to probably go down a little bit, but I've been surprised time after time again that traffic is increasing so much in the world. We are definitely extremely hungry for traffic as humans. We want to drive a lot of different things with our smartphones. But basically, 70-80% of this is video. We're looking at video in all kinds of shapes and forms, and that drives traffic. We still expect it to grow some 5 times more by 2027 from the numbers we have today. And then on top of that, we have then fixed wireless access, and that also drives a lot of traffic. It's not as many connections, and this is, you can look at it as fixed broadband, basically the broadband home to your home. It could be a replacement of fiber. It could also be a complement in areas where you don't actually have coverage. But we expect 5G to play a big role here. It's been a lot of 4G so far, but we believe it actually will drive a lot of connections. So by 2027, we expect 230 million fixed wireless access connections in the world. And based on the fact that you actually connect a household, that's probably going to represent some over 800 million individuals having their normal broadband at home, but over 5G or 4G. And of course, that is, even though that may not sound so much compared to smartphone numbers, which are around the 6-7 billion number, it still represents a lot of traffic. So we believe that almost 25% of all the traffic in the world will come from these installations. That's because these users tend to use some 200, 300, 400 gigabyte per month, rather than the 20, 30 gigabyte that we might use on smartphones. So looking more into what has happened when it comes to this fixed wireless access, because this is one of the first 5G cases, 5G opportunities that have been early on, and that is very clear for many, where 5G actually had a big play to do. And a lot of this is coming from different parts of the world. Here you see different markets, different operators, and how much they are reporting right now in terms of users. Not so much, but the ambition is higher. And what type of solutions they are supporting. The numbers here says 1 to 2, or 1 to 3, 1 to 6, relates to the left hand here why you would use fixed wireless access. So it's either a DSL replacement, your home normal VDSL or broadband, copper broadband might be able to be replaced by fixed wireless access. It could also be to connect people that don't have an ability to get the fiber or any wired solution to the fixed broadband, so connect the unconnected. Many are using it for secondary homes as well, cottage up in northern Sweden, or it could be a potential for this. The cables network may not also be the best thing. Some places where actually are challenging the fibers, because fiber is good when it's rolled out, but it has quite a lot of cost to it. But also addressing small medium enterprises could be a potential for this. Now, and this drives, of course, the gigabytes per user. But let's go back to smartphones and smartphone users, because this is kind of an interesting chart to try to explain this enormous hunger we have for users. Sorry for all the lines here, but that basically represents different regions. And right now in 2021, there is I think it's hard to say the color here. If it's a little bit of purple, it says GCC. That's basically the region, Gulf countries, that have the highest amount of gigabyte per month on average, and that's in that region. It's a very homogeneous region. It's the Saudi and the Qatar and Bahrain and UAE countries, but they are around 22 gigabyte per month on average. And below that, we see India, which might be a bit surprising to see India so high up. But this is because when 4G was rolled out in India, many users got a very great deal where they used their smartphone not just as a personal device, but as a hub for all kinds of things in the home. So they were using the smartphone as a Wi-Fi device, and therefore connected their TV, connected their laptop, and so on to the smartphone. And that have continued that type of usage in India, and therefore they have a lot of gigabytes per user in that region. But going to 2027, it will be the markets with the most amount of 5G subscriptions that we expect to have most gigabytes. And right now we expect that to be around over 50 gigabyte monthly average data is expected in North America and also Western Europe. And then, of course, the question becomes, what are people going to do with that gigabytes? Because it's hard to see us as humans having more hours to spend in front of the phone. But of course, this drives, on average, is a very, very big number, but there are markets that are already higher than this already now. I will show that to you. But just to say that these numbers actually are, we expect them to be driven also by these new type of services like augmented reality, virtual reality, or immersive services, or other things of solutions that come. So we do bet on some of these things driving traffic going forward. And just to show you why things can drive a lot of traffic, this just shows you how much gigabyte per month you would actually utilize if you were to use certain services. So 10 minutes per day, if you were to use a service 10 minutes per day using music streaming, you would basically not even get up to 1 gigabyte per month. If you do 10 minutes a day of normal YouTube watching, like this, that's around 3 to 4 gigabytes per month. But using cloud gaming, where you actually need a very high response and streaming the data with very good quality, both downlink and uplink, if you were to do that 10 minutes per day using that type of service, that means almost 60 gigabyte per month. That's kind of a lot of gigabytes just for such one service to use 10 minutes per day. And this, of course, asks or puts a number of questions to both networks. Can they cover this this capacity? And secondly, how do you charge for this? How can you actually earn money on this? And the first question on the capacity and the capabilities of network, it is very much up to 5G to solve this. 5G has the capability to do this. That's why 5G is needed. Secondly, when it comes to the monetization question or earning money on it, this has to be packaged in a different way. It cannot be that we just put it into the same unlimited package that operators are using today, but probably they will need to find new ways to charge for this, and let's see how that is done. But there are still a lot of trials already on it. Two short examples of where we are today in certain markets. So this is South Korea. Sorry. South Korea is a market dominated by 5G now. On the left-hand side, you see the number of 5G smartphones and the mobile data traffic trend, where 5G is actually using more data in the whole South Korea than 4G already today. And the amount of consumption per smartphone on the 5G is almost 3 times higher on average than all 4G users. This is, comparing all 4G users with all 5G users. And the subscriptions you see on top here. So even though there's 27% 5G subscriptions right now in South Korea, they stand for more than 50% of the traffic in the network. Another example comes from Far Eastern in Taiwan. This is also a very high consumption market where when you look at the different data plans, you can also see how it changes. 4G unlimited plan. Unlimited basically means that you can get as much as you want. Eat as much as you like, kind of solution. And here, even on 4G, they have actually using around 50 gigabyte per month on average. 5G users are then increasing that to almost 60 gigabyte per month. And this is now, not in 7 years or 6 years time. And a lot of this is driven by the fact that it's better user experience on 5G. There's a lot of new devices. When you get a new device, you, of course, are probably an early adopter on this. But it also drives higher average revenue per user, basically higher ARPU. So they are earning more money in those markets. And the contributing factors to high data consumption is the video streaming services, the fact that they have offering these unlimited plans also for 5G, and the fact that they have built out coverage very, very fast. So just to end this presentation with one thing about energy, energy consumption in mobile networks. And it's a very important question, how much energy is really used by all these networks in the world. And this is looking back a little bit on the 10-year growth factors. We can look back and see that the total ICT energy has not gone up more than 1.1 times, basically 10% increase. Networks energy has gone up 60%, 1.6 factor than what we had 10 years ago. So it is an increase, and it's a substantial increase, which has a cost effect to it. But compared to what we have got out of it, that's what you see in the blue part here. And I'm just going to highlight the last number. The amount of traffic in mobile networks last 10 years have gone up 300 times almost, 287. So there is a big disconnect. It doesn't mean, more traffic doesn't necessarily mean more energy use. But there is, of course, a growing increase in energy, which we are then with 5G actually disconnecting or decoupling. So you actually are able to do that differently. So with that, I want to end this presentation. And Marcus, do we have any questions?
Thank you, Patrik. I got plenty of questions. Thank you very much for very interesting presentations. Lots of clarifications and discussions that can be done around this. Let me start with maybe the drivers of the investments in 5G, because there's a lot of talk about turning back the clock a little bit, if I remember things right, and what I've read about is a lot of the drivers of bandwidth in the past 10 to 20 years has been, consumer experiences and such as Netflix, etc., has accounted for a lot of that growth. And the way I see it going forward is going to be a mix between industry, it's going to be things like autonomous driving, and then you also have the consumer experiences, such as you mentioned mobile gaming, etc. So maybe talk a little bit about what is what and what are the main drivers here, because there's a lot of talk about handsets, and I guess if you have an automation of production lines, not necessarily going to be driven by handsets. So maybe talk a little bit about that and straighten that out, and the drivers. And is it mainly going to be consumers which will driving this? Which will be the driver of this growth, or is it industry, or a little bit in between, or both?
Yeah, absolutely, Marcus. It's a really good question, and it has a little bit of different answers depending on how you look at it. If you look at it from a traffic perspective, basically how much traffic will be in networks going forward, it will continue to be very much consumer driven, just for the sheer fact that there are so many of us having smartphones and having those type of new devices. So traffic wise, it will come very much from the consumer. But when it comes to both investment and also the revenue side, it will be a mix, because we will see a lot of new types of solutions of 5G also for the industries, and there is so much potential for 5G. So there will be, as you mentioned, autonomous cars and so on, but that's later on in the road, but using augmented reality in the workplace, but also in factories, using automatic guided vehicles in the factory floor, and using new type of services for your supply flow, and using very high reliable video streaming for health services, and all these different things, but also ports, minings. There are so many opportunities for 5G. So these will actually drive a lot of innovation, and potentially then drive a lot of investments from just pure digitalization perspective. If you can do something more simple by virtualizing it, by digitalizing it, and using a reliable connection to do so, that will be a big reason. So many of these businesses are already trying to digitalize or doing things more cost efficient, and 5G definitely will speed this up and be a big reason to do these investments, and also provide this type of extra capabilities for these different enterprises. We'll see a lot of that, but as I said, from a sheer traffic perspective, it will take a while before all these solutions add up to the amount of data that we see in networks driven by consumers so far.
And just to get an idea, I think you were part of building a network at I know SKF a couple of years ago. They automated their production lines down in Gothenburg, and I think you and Chalmers together built the network which enabled that to happen. In such an application, if you have, what is the data use of that compared to you were talking about the mobile gaming, for instance, but what kind of sizes are we talking about in such a process? Is it possible to say?
It's hard. I don't know exactly that case for how much it will drive, but it depends a lot. There is so many different cases where you actually don't need so much data to be transferred, but you need it to be transferred very fast. Those are we call them in IoT cases, so they could be even down to kilobytes rather, but it has to go very fast to actually be very much aligned with, so you get the right information shared between the system and the process. But there are other things where you actually need more data. It could be a drone that you need to be able to handle. It could be a vehicle that you need to be able to steer, a remote excavator or things like that. Then we're talking about megabits per second, or that you need to be able to run over that. And then it's more like a smartphone module. You take the chip and you put it into these type of solutions and make sure that it's a 5G capable then, and build the whole system around it. And those will drive traffic, but they won't be incomprehensible amount. But 5G has such a capability that you can go up to 1 gigabit per second and still have a very good connection, especially in a more concise environment where you can control the spectrum, like a factory floor or things like that. So the capacity wise, it will not be a problem.
Okay. And talking about, I've been talking about Industry 4.0, and some people call it mining 4.0. You mentioned automated ports, for instance. This has been talked about for a while now. Would you say that the 5G networks and the rollout of that, is that a catalyst for that to actually happen? That is, should we expect, as we have a broad rollout of that over the next few years, that this will actually happen, or is it something else that is needed too?
No, I think it's definitely a catalyzer, but the underlying driver is very much from the enterprise perspective, is to digitalize, to increase productivity, to reduce cost, and to make sure that the processes works more efficiently and things like that. And then the question is, can we do this better by wireless than wireline? And the answer is often yes. You don't want to have cables running around in different places, and some type of application it's not possible even to have cables. You need a wireless solution, and you need a wireless solution that you can control and is reliable. Then you get into realizing that cellular will be the answer to a lot of these. And if you go to cellular, you need to have a very high stable connection with a lot of capacity. And then 5G is the one that now is available, and therefore it will be a catalyzer to it and actually drive this, because now the capability is there to do many of these things. While before it was harder, it's more available and relevant, and operators can also provide enterprises with what we call a specific slice of the network, so they get control over there, and therefore can be more secure on their connections. So 5G comes with a lot of capabilities here that definitely speeds this up, even though the whole digitalization effort is ongoing as well as a driver.
Mm-hmm. And if we talk a little bit about the investments, you make the networks which allow for this to happen, and that's what you sell. And I remember back in the 2000s when you had the 3G auctions, etc., and the enormous money that went into these auctions and almost drove some companies bust on the back of it. So talk a little bit about investments. So I assume there's huge investments that needs to go into this to make it happen. And looking at the previous cycle on the 4G and who's been the winner of this, it's been maybe, I might be wrong, but the handset manufacturers like Apple has been making more profits on the back of this, of the upgrades from 3G to 4G than maybe the operators themselves. So who is paying for this and who is the benefiter, etc.?
Yeah, and that's a lot of things or discussions are going on into that right now. But a lot of the investments is obviously coming from the fact that we can provide a better service, and that is coming from operators able to actually see that capability and that opportunities. But the innovation will come from different places and different ideas that supports this. But this is, I think, if 4G was or 3G, the earlier generation, was more clear cut, where you actually came from the fact that you invested in spectrum, you built your network, and then offered a solution to consumers. This now, with 5G, you have the capability to be much more of an ecosystem play, where we actually need many more partners to be on board to actually build something for specific services, whether it's health, logistics, or ports, minings, and all of these things. It becomes a much bigger ecosystem that needs to be developed to do that. So there's a number of different drivers for this, but the investment will come from different parts, and not as easy to see as it was before, even though the network as such and the licenses will still be the mobile operators. And that's, of course, a central part of here, and that they do own the license, they do own the spectrum, they do own the network.
All right. Well, I got many more questions. Super interesting topic, but unfortunately we're running out of time. So I think I'll leave it there. But thank you very much, Patrik, for coming here to talk to us. As I said, super interesting topic. It'll happen a lot over the next few years, and we're all waiting for the 6G to be the next kind of buzzword. But until then, thank you very much.
Thank you for having me.